A complete electric car built, working, ready to drive for the price of an iPhone, while America pays $50,000 and waits 8 years to pay it off. Here's a number worth sitting with. The average price of a new car in America has crept up to nearly $50,000. Not a luxury model, not a sports car, not some imported exotic. Just the average car, the kind a regular family buys to commute, to take kids to school, to live their lives. Loan terms have quietly stretched too. What used to be a 4-year commitment now routinely runs 6, 7, even 8 years. And here's the twist. A growing number of Americans owe more on their car loans than their cars are actually worth. If they sold the vehicle tomorrow, they'd still be in debt. Meanwhile, automakers keep posting billions in profit year after year. So the obvious question becomes uncomfortable fast. If buyers are stretched thin, why do prices keep climbing? And an even sharper question follows right behind it. How are Chinese manufacturers building vehicles for a fraction of that price, while packing in more technology every year? The answer isn't found in America at all. It's unfolding on the other side of the planet, and it's bigger than anyone in Detroit wants to admit. For most of the 20th century, the formula was simple. Build cars for everyone, students, young families, first-time buyers, retirees. The goal was volume. Sell as many vehicles as possible, cover every price point, dominate every segment of the market. Then something shifted. Automakers discovered a simple but seductive truth. Bigger vehicles make far more money. A compact sedan might generate a modest margin. A fully loaded SUV could generate several times that. A pickup truck? Even more on top of that. Once the spreadsheets made that obvious, the strategy basically wrote itself. Why sell 10 cheap cars for the same profit you could earn from 3 expensive ones? So the affordable models started disappearing. Ford pulled the plug on most of its traditional sedans. General Motors leaned hard into trucks and SUVs. Other manufacturers followed the same script. Walk into a dealership today and you'll notice something strange. The entry-level car, the one that used to be a young person's first step into car ownership, has all but vanished. In its place, buyers get pushed toward bigger vehicles loaded with features they'll probably never use. Massive touchscreens, premium trim packages, complex driver assist systems, all stacked onto price tags that would have seemed absurd 20 years ago. For the manufacturers, this strategy worked beautifully. For the people actually buying the cars, not so much. A $50,000 car sounds expensive because it is. But that's not really how people buy cars anymore. Dealerships have shifted the entire conversation away from total price and onto one single number, the monthly payment. Can you handle $600, $700, $800? Stretch the loan out far enough, and almost any price starts to look affordable, at least on paper. And that's where the trap closes. Longer loans make high prices feel manageable. Manageable prices encourage even higher sticker prices, since buyers are now judging affordability by the monthly number, not the total. The system feeds itself. A car that should be out of reach suddenly looks within reach, until interest piles up, depreciation kicks in, and owners realize they're underwater on a vehicle that's worth less than what they still owe. While Detroit was busy optimizing profit per vehicle, China was optimizing something else entirely: scale. The question Chinese manufacturers were asking wasn't, how do we maximize margin on each car? It was, how do we build transportation for everyone? Those two questions sound similar. They're not. One produces premium products. The other builds an entire industrial ecosystem, and that ecosystem is now producing some of the strangest, most surprising vehicles on the planet. Picture walking into an auto show expecting luxury sedans, supercars, six-figure concept cars. Instead, you find tiny electric vehicles priced between $1,000 and $5,000. Mini pickup trucks, three-wheeled EVs, electric tuk-tuks, solar-powered scooters, micro-delivery vans. Vehicles so stripped down you can practically see every component that makes them move. At first, plenty of Western visitors laugh. Some of these look like shrunken parodies of famous models. A tiny Defender lookalike here, a pocket-sized BMW-inspired hatchback there. They look like toys, but then something shifts. People start picturing how they'd actually use one. A quick grocery run, a short trip across town, picking up the kids, getting around a retirement community, all without spending $50,000. Suddenly, the joke isn't funny anymore, because these little vehicles are solving a problem most Western automakers gave up on years ago: affordable mobility. Not luxury, not status, not horsepower. Just movement at the lowest possible cost. Behind those tiny cars sits something far bigger An industrial machine capable of producing batteries, motors, electronics, software, charging systems, solar panels, and entire supply chains at a scale almost no other country can match. The biggest misconception about Chinese cars is that they're cheap because of cheap labor. That explanation might have held up 20 years ago. It doesn't explain what's happening now. Modern vehicle manufacturing isn't really about labor anymore. It's about systems, factories, supply chains, battery production, materials processing, software development, electronics manufacturing. In America, the battery might come from one supplier, the electronics from another, the screen from somewhere else, the raw materials from overseas, and the software from a completely separate company. In China, many of those suppliers sit within a few hours of each other. Battery makers sit next to motor manufacturers. Electronic suppliers are already producing components for smartphones, home batteries, solar panels, and EVs, all at once, all under the same roof or down the road. The result is everything moves faster, costs less, and is easier to improve. That's why Chinese automakers can roll out new models at a pace that consistently catches Western manufacturers off guard. The feedback loop is shorter, the suppliers are closer, the engineering teams are closer. It stops looking like a collection of separate companies and starts looking like one enormous industrial machine, one that gets faster every single year. Nowhere is this more visible than in batteries. Batteries are becoming what engines used to be, the most important technology in the entire industry. And China didn't just build battery factories. It built an entire battery ecosystem, from raw material extraction to processing to manufacturing to recycling. Once batteries get cheaper, everything downstream gets cheaper too. The car, the scooter, the delivery van, the microcar. Transportation itself gets cheaper. When Americans hear about Chinese cars, they usually hear about the flagship products, the latest BYD, the newest Xiaomi EV, the fastest acceleration numbers, the most advanced self-driving features. But oddly enough, those aren't the most important vehicles coming out of China. The tiny EVs, the mini trucks, the solar scooters, the strange three-wheelers dismissed as toys, those are the ones that reveal something deeper. They show what happens when an industry prioritizes accessibility over prestige. Think about how most people actually use a car: commuting, grocery runs, school drop-offs, errands, trips measured in tens of miles, not hundreds. Yet plenty of households are driving vehicles capable of crossing entire states, towing heavy trailers, climbing mountains, tasks they'll likely never perform. It's a bit like buying a commercial airliner to go to the supermarket. For decades, consumers accepted that trade-off. Bigger meant better, larger meant safer, more expensive meant more desirable. But younger generations are increasingly rewriting that equation. They care about affordability, convenience, technology, and practicality. This is where China's micro-EV ecosystem gets genuinely interesting. These vehicles aren't trying to impress anyone. They're trying to solve one specific problem. How do you move a person from point A to point B for the lowest possible cost? Solve that at scale, and you could reshape the entire industry. Because once transportation becomes cheap enough, entirely new markets open up. Students, retirees, low-income households, dense urban centers, developing countries. Hundreds of millions of people currently priced out of car ownership suddenly become customers. For over a century, Detroit defined the automobile and changed the world doing it. But no industry stands still forever. Ask Kodak, ask Blockbuster, ask Nokia. Each one dominated its market until the rules changed underneath them. The rules may be changing again. The next automotive revolution might not be about horsepower, luxury, or acceleration. It might be about affordability. What if the most important vehicle of the next decade isn't a $100,000 electric pickup, but a $5 Xeron electric commuter? That's exactly why governments around the world are paying close attention to Chinese automakers. Not because these vehicles are irrelevant, but because they're becoming impossible to ignore. The most dangerous competition rarely comes from above, from the luxury end of the market. It comes from below, from the segment everyone else abandoned, and history shows that's usually where disruption begins. So why are Chinese cars cheaper? It's not just labor, it's not just policy, it's not just batteries, it's all of it together. An industrial ecosystem built to relentlessly drive down costs, willing to experiment, willing to fail, and willing to build for markets that competitors wrote off as too small to bother with. The real question isn't whether these tiny cars will ever show up on American roads. It's whether they're exposing something Americans already want: choice. Right now, millions of people are squeezed between two extremes: used cars getting more expensive, and new cars getting harder to afford. That gap keeps widening, and gaps in markets eventually get filled. Maybe Detroit fills it. Maybe Silicon Valley does. Maybe some startup nobody's heard of yet. Or maybe it comes from a massive network of factories on the other side of the world, building cars that people once laughed at. The funny thing about disruption is that it almost never looks important at first. The first smartphone looked unimpressive. The first digital camera looked unimpressive. The first streaming service looked unimpressive. One day, people might look back at those tiny electric cars sitting quietly in Chinese exhibition halls and realize they weren't the punchline, they were the warning. Because the future of transportation might not belong to the biggest vehicle, the fastest one, or the most expensive one. It might belong to whichever one gives the most people the freedom to simply move. And right now, the rest of the world is watching China very, very closely.